This scene takes place in a journalism classroom. For the purposes of learning more about journalism, students are asked to write about many different topics. The anniversary of 9/11 is coming up, and the students are going to be asked to write a free write.
Students, remember the rules of our free writes. Just put down whatever comes to mind. Your topic today: what, in your opinion, has been the impact of the events of September 11th, 2001 on U.S. culture? You have 5 minutes.
They're taking 5 minutes to write their small free write. Think to yourself, is this a good question to ask? I know history is important, but what is the expense of marginalizing minority students in the classroom?
We can learn as much about our writing by hearing it as we can by reading it silently.
We're asking for volunteers to read their free writes to the class. Miss McGrath noticed that George, an outspoken junior who is known for frequently referencing his Christian faith in classes, was the only student volunteering. She reluctantly looked at him and nodded, and he stood up to read his free write.
I believe most people are good people, but I believe the Muslim religion is immoral. 9/11 was a tragedy brought to this country by an immoral religion. It changed everything from how we travel to who we allow in our country.
Miss McGrath considered interrupting George's reading at this point, but 1 week earlier, when they did their first share alouds of the semester, she set the ground rule: we listen carefully and mindfully without interrupting. She felt stuck. George continues, but as a Christian, what's most important to me is that the attacks helped us remember how important it is for the United States to be a Christian nation. That will turn out to be a good thing for American culture. George bowed playfully and sat down. Miss McGrath, scanning the room, was surprised to see several students nodding in agreement. Hasina, one of her Muslim students, stared down at her desk. Assam, the other Muslim student, looked as though he wanted to say something, then looked at Miss McGrath as if to say, "Are you going to respond to that?" Miss McGrath knew she needed to respond, but she was not sure how to do so.
Several of my students agree with George's statement about how Islam is immoral, while there are 2 Muslim kids in my class. How can I make sure that I respond to George and explain to him the issue with his free write? I can understand where George is coming from. 9/11 was a terrorist attack that ruined thousands of lives. I can understand the stigma and grouping of the whole group. However, others, like Hasina and Essam, are not a part of the minority that George believes is the majority. Most of the students agree with George, which could cause a challenge to change their viewpoint, and agreeing with George or not responding will make Hassana and Issam feel worse. If I do respond and say it was inappropriate, it would go against my rule I made about free writes earlier. Each student has their own thought process as to which is right and why they feel the way that they do, but George is not interculturally competent, and as a teacher, I should step in to defuse the situation and let him know not all Muslims think radically like those who participated in the 9/11 attacks.
We believe as a group that Ms. McGrath should adopt a multicultural educational standard in the classroom where from time to time she teaches her students about different cultures around the world. This will change their ideology after hearing this from their teacher and realizing they have had such closed-minded ideals on so many groups when they do not know much about them.
Now, class, without truly understanding or knowing about the mass group known as Muslims, it is a necessity that we do not jump to conclusions or lump a whole group into the same category as a few people that did something so vile.